it's challenging. And I thought Prime Minister Carney did a good job. It's about building relationships. But President Trump could agree to something one day, he'll wake up and change his mind the next day, and you won't even know what hit you. And I mentioned to the Prime Minister, yes, we have to strike a deal with the U.S., but you can't get rolled over by this guy. We're an economic powerhouse with the U.S. We're the #1 customer. We buy over $356 billion a year, U.S., #1 customer in the entire world. Ontario alone is the #1 trading partner, and I always like saying customer, to 15 states, #2 to 12 other states. We do $500 billion of two-way trade alone with the U.S. So if he can't get a deal, we have to hit back. Yeah. We just have to. And I'm not speaking on behalf of any premier, yeah. But my good friend Scott Moe, he has the uranium, he has the potash. The uranium keeps their 94 nuclear facilities going down in the U.S. The potash could devastate the U.S. agriculture. Ourselves, nickel, 60% of the high-grade nickel comes from Sudbury. That's used for their military, for aerospace, for manufacturing. This is just to name a few, not to mention our aluminum and our steel and so on and so forth. So I would definitely not roll over. I'd hit him back hard, in my opinion. And that's what he understands. He can't be bullied, yeah. And he shouldn't be bullied. But it's a tough position Prime Minister Carney is in. But I'm glad they're building a relationship. Yeah.
Well, reducing the impact of tariffs on the Canadian economy was only part of sort of the broader Canadian strategy of weathering this storm. And one of the other aspects was reducing interprovincial trade barriers. And the federal government had a stated goal of reducing all of them by July 1st. I know that we haven't necessarily hit that target, but there are a lot of moving parts in that. How would you assess where we are nationally on that massive project?
Well, we're moving along really in a fast manner. We led the country in making an agreement with 10 provinces and territories, and we have a few more to go. Be it Quebec and Newfoundland. I'm sorry, 11. We still have Quebec and Newfoundland to go, and great premiers. And what that does, to give you an idea, the majority of the people in Canada didn't even realize we had a Canadian free trade agreement amongst provinces. They didn't realize you couldn't ship a case of wine from BC over to Ontario or vice versa. We do $340 billion of trade, Ontario does, with all other provinces and territories. And as I mentioned, it'll add $200 billion to our economy and 6% to our GDP. And we were the first government to get rid of the exceptions right across the board to open it up. So hopefully the federal government, I know they said they'd get it done soon, but we have to make sure they get it done immediately.
With Ontario taking a leadership position on something like that, it's almost like a leap of faith. You have to say to the other provinces, we're willing to give this up, something that we've been protecting our piece of the pie for so long. We're willing to give up that piece of the pie, but in order for the pie to grow, everybody has to follow our lead. Have you sensed that is the case? You said that there's two provinces that are holdouts, but have you sensed that more or less they are willing to agree that if we give up these little pieces that we're holding on to, the pie itself will grow?
Well, we're the largest market. I'm a free trader. I believe that we should all work together. And it increases the cost, if we don't do this, by 15% on our products. And Newfoundland, they're scared about their fisheries going over to Nova Scotia and being processed in Nova Scotia. I get it. Premier Legault, I have a great relationship, smart businessman. He wants to have his own little proposal, so we'll work with him. And then we'll have all 13 of us on the same page.
So tariff strategy, interprovincial trade barriers. The third part of the strategy was to build out Canadian infrastructure, and the Liberals suggested the projects of national importance. The first 5 The initial tranche of that list came out recently. Darlington was on that list. Now, critics would say Darlington was already well in development, didn't need a push from the feds. But the other criticism that I've heard levied is, and you referenced it in your speech, was sort of the burdenous regulatory system put in place by the Trudeau Liberals. It seems like, and this is the criticism that I've heard, that the response by this incarnation of the Liberal government has been to overlay that old innovation-killing regulatory body and system with a new system to speed things up. But the things that it speeds up are projects that are handpicked by the Liberal government and the Liberal government alone. Is that a fair criticism?
It's fair and it's accurate. But we're going to work hand in hand with the Prime Minister, and I know Minister Lecce will work with his colleagues, Tim Hodgson, which I think is another great, super bright minister, and I know Prime Minister Carney is fortunate to have him. It's his old Goldman Sachs buddy, and they used to call him Killer when he was on the floor. So, but he's no nonsense, get things done. But you can't just put lipstick on a pig and just try to cover it up. They have to come up with new ideas, get rid of the regulatory burden that's costing us massive amounts of money. As I mentioned to Prime Minister Carney, yes, we got to worry about Trump, but for now, let's start focusing what we can do. What can we do as a country to make ourselves more competitive by lowering corporate taxes, lowering personal taxes, getting rid of all the regulations and the burden, and unleash our country? That's what we need to do. And stop worrying about what Prime Minister Trudeau did for 10 years. This is a fresh start for him, and he has to just keep moving. And the other thing is, they have to move faster and quicker, as quickly as possible. And Sabia there, he's a smart guy too. He's a really smart guy. But sometimes government can just overwhelm you. So we need to start moving as quickly as possible and get things done. And we're going to be there to support them every step of the way.
We're hearing that the next tranche of projects of national importance are going to be unveiled before the Grey Cup. Are you hopeful? Are you hoping that the Ring of Fire is on that list?
Well, he told me he would be. I would take him for his word, right? And I'm all about a handshake, and when someone tells you they're going to do something, you do it. It's no different than ourselves. When we say we're going to do something, we get it done. So we're going to work with them. And
let's assume for a second it is on the list. What happens the day after that announcement?
Well, then we start moving and getting things done. Actually, the preliminary work's already being done.
Yeah.
We're already starting the road to the Ring of Fire with Webber up in the far north. In Arrowland, Chief Sonny is just a fabulous chief, very progressive thinker. So they want to start, which they're doing right now, and I'm going to take a quick trip up there to, again, be there to support them any way we can.
I had Premier Danielle Smith on my radio show last week, and I asked her the differences of working as a premier with the Trudeau Liberals versus the Mark Carney Liberals, and she said pragmatism was the biggest change, that she felt that there was a more pragmatic approach to government. It was far less ideological, at least in these early days. What's your assessment?
I agree. You're dealing with a business person that's learning government, but we're there to support him about government. And he understands where he has to go. We just have to move quicker and faster on everything across the board. Great personality, takes your calls, takes your messages, returns them right away. He's good. Folks, I don't care. I'm a staunch fiscal conservative, staunch. But I don't give two hoots about political stripes. I just don't. And don't get me wrong, I'm so proud to be the leader of the PC party. But, I'll work with anyone. I think I've shown it doesn't matter if it's an NDP mayor or Liberal leader. And that's the same right across our country. We have NDP premiers, which I get along very well with, Liberal premiers and Conservative premiers. And we all work well together.
You have demonstrated an ability to work with anybody and, in fact, build friendships and relationships to the benefit of the people of Ontario. Who has surprised you from a personality perspective? Let's put policy aside. You're the dean of the premiers around the premiers table. Which premier has surprised you in terms of how well you get along well with them?
Well, two, I get along very well with Houston and Premier Scott Moe. Scott was the first person I met. We're like-minded, so is Tim Houston. They're great. But I love Wab Kinew, too. I always tell Wab, you're politically misguided. He sounds like a conservative when he speaks. But, he's an absolute champion. We've went through, Scott and I sat at the table the other day, and we wondered how many premiers we went through since we're elected. We're kind of the senior statespeople, and we counted 22 premiers we went through. So, but we have a good team, really good team that we work with right now.
Well, actually, I'm glad that you mentioned Manitoba and Saskatchewan, because I want to return to tariffs, but not American tariffs, but the Chinese tariffs.
Yeah.
That on this one file, it does seem like a crack is appearing in the Team Canada approach. Both Manitoba and Saskatchewan have requested that the federal government remove the 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in the hopes of restoring normalcy to our relationship with China, as well as to the canola industry. You've gone on record against this tactic. Tell us why.
Well, first of all, I had a conversation the other day. Scott called me up and said, hey, I got to protect my province. I get it. I get why Wab Kinew and Scott are saying, drop the tariffs, but I have to do the same thing, and I respect their sector. They ship about $4.9 billion to China on canola. Well, look at our auto sector. It's 157,000 workers, direct jobs, indirect. Multiply that by 4 times. We've seen over $46 billion of new investments. So I respect what they're doing, but there's no damn way we should drop tariffs on China. I'll tell you that. Absolutely not.
I think one of the reasons, Mr. Premier, that you resonate with the people at home, can't speak for the people in this room, but for the people at home, is your willingness to demonstrate and show people how emotional this tariff war with the Americans has made you, because I think a lot of people at home connect with you on that front. They feel that as well. And last week, I really did I saw that a prime example of it as it related to the comments made by Howard Lutnick and the impact of, if his dream comes to pass, what that means for the people of Oshawa, for the people of the auto industry in this province. I mean, it feels to me like this is a crisis for the automotive sector in Ontario, the likes of which we have never seen before. How are you approaching that?
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Flavio Volpe, which is in the room. The guy's an absolute champion. He's been leading the charge, and he's doing a great job. But I think, absolutely. It's become very personal, not just myself, but every single Canadian. Every Canadian knows a friend, a neighbor, a relative that lives in the U.S. or a business partner. And Howard Lutnick, a smart business person, he has to learn politics as well. But he has to get on the page with the president. The president's saying one thing, that he wants both auto sectors to thrive, and Howard Lutnick saying we're going to build autos. Well, I'll tell you, it's going to kill the auto manufacturers down there. All of them have come out and said they've already lost $1 billion because of free trade. It's so intertwined. The auto pact's been around since the 1960s. And as you've heard many times, auto parts will go back and forth 6, 7, 8 times. And I always say, you can't unscramble an egg that's been around since 1960. You have to make the omelet larger. And I've also said, inform our American friends, that we buy 400% more vehicles than anyone in the entire world. And the vehicles that we buy off them, we produce roughly, and it varies, but 1.7 million autos a year. And 50% of them have American parts. So it's going to devastate the auto sector in the U.S. But we're going to survive. We're going to become more creative and come up with new ideas. And that's what we're going to do. But the auto sector has been here for 100 years, and it will always be here for the next 100 years.
As somebody who reports on the rise of violent crime on my radio show far too often for my liking. You know, the issues of criminal justice reform are top of mind for me, as I'm sure they are for so many people in this room. What are you hearing from Ottawa in terms of what their plans are for criminal justice reform? Because just last week, the Tories put forth a bill, C-242, the Bail Not Jail Act, which got voted down, but that was followed quickly by the Liberals vowing that the Conservatives would be very happy with what's coming down the pike, with a far more comprehensive second look at criminal justice reform. What have you asked for from Ottawa, and what have they told you about what's coming down the pike?
Well, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to my Attorney General, Doug Downey, amazing Attorney General, my Solicitor General, Michael Kersner, that's working with their colleagues. I know Doug Downey's been working with Minister Fraser as their Auditor General, but our message to them, very simple, is don't have a watered-down bail system. People are done. Folks, we're out in the field every day, we're doing polls. I've never seen crime go from eighth out of 10 up to number 1 beside economy and healthcare. People are done with this crime. Everyone in this room knows someone that got their car stolen or a home invasion. You know, we experienced it down the street just in my little neighborhood. 4 home invasions. They kicked the door in. They put guns to people's heads, terrorize them for their keys. And then they steal their keys. And guess what happens when they get caught? They go in front of the judge, and the judge says, oh, little Johnny didn't mean to do this. We're going to let him out on bail. He doesn't let him out on bail once. This is a 4th, 5th, 6th time. There has to be consequences when you do violent crimes. The poor family in Kleinberg, you know, just imagine trying to protect your 4-year-old daughter when these punks have a gun to her head, and he gets shot in front of his 3 kids and his wife. They won't be able to live in the home. That's going to impact the kids their whole lives. And there has to be accountability. And that's what we need. We need tough bail reform. Not only that, we need mandatory sentences. So when a criminal goes in with a gun, you know you're doing X amount of years, whatever it is, 10 years. But their argument, the Liberals are saying, well, you know, Harper tried that. No, Harper did a broad brush across everything. Let's start focusing on areas. And to be very frank, the judiciary system should not be interfering in policies. It's not their house that is getting broken into. You know, again, we have to make sure that we set mandatory sentences. You go in with a gun, you're getting 10 years. The last part, what's happening, because I get updates on a daily basis from frontline police officers and the chiefs around the province and the commissioner. So now the older, crooks are giving guns to 16, 17, and 18-year-olds to go in there saying nothing will happen to you. And do you know what's a shame? Nothing does happen to them. So they kick in the door with a gun. We have to change the Young Offenders Act. And it can't be, you know, I can tell you, everyone in this room, myself included, when you're 16, 17, 18, you know that going into a house and kicking the door in with a gun, like that is not good. And there's too many judges that are just bleeding hearts that, oh, we got to give them a second chance. No, these are troublemakers. These kids need to be sentenced, and they need to learn before they go in. There are consequences when you go in with a gun on a violent crime. I'm not talking about the chocolate bars and everything else being stolen. But what is ticking me off, and they're pretty brazen, and it starts the old broken window theory with Mayor Giuliani years ago. They're walking in, and I'm going to meet all the retailers, walking in with shopping carts, and they're just loading up their carts, no matter if it's the LCBO or Home Depot or Walmart or anything, and they're stealing goods. And they can't do anything. The security guards can't do anything. You know, can I tell a little story, two-second story?
Please.
So a couple months ago, I pull in, I escape from my detail at 8 o'clock in the morning before they come, and it ticks them off. So I hop in my pickup, and I want to go to Home Depot. It was on a Saturday. And I pull up, and I wanted to get some plants. Actually, it was the weekend before the Prime Minister came. I wanted to get plants for the cottage, so I loaded up. And And I pulled up right by the nursery. I think majority have been to Home Depot. So I pull right up, I load up all the plants, and I'm ready to pull out. And here's this guy with a backpack and, a bag. And he's walking out, and the store manager's yelling at him, come back, come back. And the security guard's there. And I said, well, go get him. We aren't allowed to go get him. And so he went around the side of where all the plants and outside the parking lot. So I was in my car. I said, screw this. I'm going after this guy. So, and by this time, my heart's beating. I'm ticked off. So I go racing behind. No one can see. And I pull up behind him and jump into the car. I said, buddy, what's in your bag? Nothing's in my bag. I said, buddy, I'm going to kick your ass all over the parking lot. Show me what's in your bag. And I did. I couldn't help myself. And so I said, buddy, come over here. And nothing's in my bag. And so we start. Now, by this time, the store manager comes, and he's on fire. He's cursing and swearing. I guess I threw in a couple colorful language, too. And so he's emptying out his bag. And all of a sudden, so he's saying, nothing's here. I said, how about your other bag? It's because he dropped it and heard a cling. And so he went in there, and he pulled out one of those saw blades that you open up.
Yeah. And
you use it as a saw blade. And the store manager said, that's what he stole. And then, we start saying da-da-da-da to the guy. And then I said, keep emptying out the bag. He pulls out some cutters, tin snips. And by this time, I'm in a pretty rage. I'm just in a full out rage on this guy. And I said, buddy, you stole those too. And he goes, I swear to God, I didn't steal them. I didn't steal them. He said, look at the rust on them. I looked at them, they were rusty. I said, okay, those are yours. But the rest... And then I went on to tell him if I ever see him in the parking lot, he's going to get a beating like he's never got before. But that's what you have to do. So.
Well, that's where we are now.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately that's where we are. Unfortunately, Mr. Premier, we are out of time. But despite what